The storm came without warning. Kang Tiho was fixing a broken heating unit when the sky turned green. He looked up through the small window of Outpost Sigma 12 and saw something he had never seen before. The clouds were moving in circles, spinning faster and faster. Lightning that was not white but purple cut through the air like angry snakes. "Iron storm," he whispered to himself, "a big one." He had been on the frozen moon of Velrath 7 for 2 years now. He was an engineer. He fixed things. That was his job. The Coalition sent him here because humans were good at fixing things, even if they were not good at much else. At least, that is what the other species believed. Tiho was 34 years old. He was not tall, he was not strong. He had soft brown eyes and hands that were always dirty with grease and machine oil. The alien crews at the outpost liked him well enough. He was quiet. He did his work. He did not cause trouble. The Kyrthians liked him less than the others. They were a proud species. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk on 2 legs. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in thick fur with teeth that could bite through metal. They were warriors. They respected strength and power and honor. They did not respect humans. Soft creatures, they called his kind. Prey animals who learned to use tools. Tiho did not argue with them. What was the point? He just fixed their machines and stayed out of their way. But now the storm was here, and everything changed. The power died first. One moment the lights were on, and the next moment there was only darkness. Tiho grabbed his emergency flashlight and moved to the backup generator. It took him 20 minutes to get it running. When the lights came back, they were dim and weak, but they were enough. His communication device crackled with static. He tried to call the main base. Nothing. He tried to call the orbital station. Nothing. The ion storm was blocking all signals. They were alone. Then he heard it, a voice, broken and full of fear. "Help, Cubs, den collapsed, please." The voice cut off. Tiho's blood went cold. He knew that voice. It belonged to one of the Kyrthian guardians. The den was 3 kilometers north of his outpost. It was where the Kyrthian pack kept their young ones, their cubs. The alpha of the pack, a massive warrior named Voreth, was not on Velrath 7. He was on a warship somewhere in space, trapped outside the storm. His cubs were in that den, 3 of them, 2 males and 1 female, the youngest members of the pack. And the den had collapsed. Tiho stood very still for a long moment. He looked at the storm raging outside his window. The temperature had already dropped to -40 degrees. It would get colder, much colder. No human was supposed to go outside in conditions like this. The cold would kill him in hours. But those cubs would die faster. He thought about calling for help, but there was no help. The storm had cut them off from everyone. He thought about waiting, but waiting meant death for those children. Tiho was not a hero. He was just an engineer. He fixed things. But sometimes fixing things meant doing something stupid. He put on every piece of cold weather gear he owned. 3 layers of thermal clothing, 2 pairs of gloves, a mask that covered his whole face. It would not be enough. He knew it would not be enough, but it was all he had. He stepped outside into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall of knives. Even through all his clothing, he could feel it trying to reach his skin. The wind screamed in his ears. Snow and ice flew through the air so thick that he could barely see 10 meters ahead. He walked north. Every step was hard. The snow came up to his knees. The wind pushed against him like it wanted him to turn back. His lungs burned from breathing the frozen air, but he kept walking. It took him 2 hours to travel 3 kilometers. By the time he saw the den, he could no longer feel his fingers or his toes. The den was destroyed. Half of it had fallen in on itself. Great chunks of ice and rock lay scattered across the ground. Tiho saw bodies, 2 Kyrthian guardians crushed under the weight of the collapsed ceiling. They were dead. Their eyes were open and empty. He felt sick, but he did not stop. "Hello," he called out. His voice was weak against the wind. "Is anyone alive?" He heard a sound, a small sound, a whimper. Tiho climbed over the broken rocks and pushed through the fallen ice. He found a small space, a pocket of air where the ceiling had not completely collapsed. And there, huddled together in the darkness, were three small shapes. The cubs. They were alive, but barely. Their fur was wet and matted. Their small bodies were shaking. Kyrthians were warm-blooded creatures. They needed heat to survive, and the heat was gone. Tiho knelt down beside them. The largest cub looked up at him with yellow eyes full of fear. It growled, a weak, pitiful sound. "It is okay," Tiho said softly. "I am here to help." The cub did not understand his words. It only knew that a strange creature was in its home. It snapped at him with small teeth. The bite caught his hand and drew blood. Tiho did not pull away. He did not yell. He just stayed very still and spoke in a low, gentle voice. "I know you are scared. I know I am not your kind, but I am all you have right now, so please, let me help you." The cub growled again, but it did not bite. Tiho looked around the ruined den. There was no way to repair it. The heating core was destroyed. The walls were broken. If they stayed here, they would all freeze to death. He had to move them, but where? His outpost was 3 kilometers away. He could barely survive the walk himself. How could he carry 3 cubs through that storm? He could not, it was impossible. But impossible was just a word, and Tiho was an engineer. He did not believe in impossible. He believed in problems and solutions. The solution came to him slowly. He could not carry them 3 kilometers, but he did not have to. He just had to keep them alive until the storm ended, and to do that, he needed heat. He looked at the wreckage around him. Broken machines, torn metal, shattered thermal units, useless on their own, but in the hands of an engineer who knew how to fix things. Maybe not so useless after all. Tiho took off his outer gloves and began to work. His fingers turned red, then white, then numb, but he kept working. He pulled wires from broken machines. He found pieces of thermal blankets. He built a small shelter from the debris, just big enough for 4 bodies. When it was done, he wrapped the 3 cubs in the thermal blankets and pulled them close to his chest. They struggled at first. They did not want to be touched by this strange, soft, furless creature. But they were cold, so cold, and he was warm. One by one, they stopped struggling. One by one, they pressed their small bodies against his. One by one, they closed their eyes. Tiho held them in the darkness and listened to the storm rage outside. He did not know how long it would last. He did not know if help would ever come. He only knew one thing. These children were not going to die. Not today. Not while he still had breath in his body. He was just an engineer. He fixed things. And right now, he was going to fix this. The storm screamed. The cold bit deep. And in a tiny shelter made of broken machines and desperate hope, a human held 3 alien cubs and refused to let them go. The first night was the hardest. Tiho did not sleep. He could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the cold creeping closer. He felt the small bodies pressed against him growing weaker. So he stayed awake, watching, waiting, holding the cubs like they were made of glass. The shelter he had built was small and ugly. It was made of broken metal and torn blankets and pieces of machines that no longer worked, but it kept the wind out. That was something. The cubs did not trust him. The largest one, a male with dark gray fur, watched him with angry yellow eyes. Every time Tiho moved, it growled low in its throat. The second cub, another male with lighter fur, was too weak to growl. It just lay there, breathing slowly, its small body burning with fever. The third cub, a female with fur the color of fresh snow, was the smallest. She shivered so hard that Tiho could feel it through his clothes. He talked to them. He did not know if they understood human words. Probably they did not. But his grandmother had once told him that the sound of a voice could bring comfort, even when the words meant nothing. "My name is Tiho," he said softly. "I come from a planet called Earth. It is very far from here. It has oceans and mountains and forests. It has cities where millions of people live together. It is not as cold as this place. I miss it sometimes." The gray cub growled. "I have a sister," Tiho continued. "Her name is Yuna. She is a doctor. She helps sick people get better. She always told me I was too stubborn. She said I would rather die than give up on something. Maybe she was right." He pulled the cubs closer. The smallest one, the white female, made a soft sound. Not a growl, not a whimper, something else. Something almost like a question. "You want to know why I am here?" Tiho asked. "I am here because you needed help. That is all. That is the only reason." Morning came, gray and cold. The storm had not stopped. Tiho looked at his food supplies. He had brought emergency rations from the outpost, enough for one human for maybe 5 days, but he was not alone. He had 3 hungry mouths to feed. Kyrthian cubs needed protein, lots of it. They were predators even as children. His human food would not be enough. Tiho thought about the ice worms. He had seen them before, burrowing under the frozen ground. They were ugly creatures as long as his arm and as thick as his wrist. The Kyrthians hunted them sometimes. They said the meat was good. He did not want to hunt ice worms. He was an engineer, not a hunter. He had never killed anything larger than a bug in his whole life. But the cubs needed food. "Stay here," he told them. "I will come back." The gray cub growled louder. The white female made that questioning sound again. The light-furred male did not react at all. He was getting weaker. Tiho put on his cold-weather gear and stepped outside. The storm hit him immediately, stealing his breath and blinding his eyes. He pushed forward anyway. Finding ice worms was not hard. They left tunnels in the snow, small holes where they had burrowed down into the ground. Catching them was the hard part. They were fast and slippery, and they bit when threatened. It took him 3 hours to catch 2 worms. By the time he returned to the shelter, his hands were bleeding and his whole body was shaking from the cold. But he had food. The cubs ate like they had never eaten before. Even the gray one stopped growling long enough to tear into the worm meat. The light-furred male, the sick one, ate slowly, but he ate. That was a good sign. Days passed. Tiho lost count of how many. He hunted ice worms in the mornings. He repaired the shelter in the afternoons. He held the cubs through the long, dark nights. He stopped eating his own food and gave it all to them. He told himself he was not hungry. He told himself he could survive on less. The fever took him on the 5th day. It came slowly, starting as a headache and growing into something worse. His body was not made for this cold. His immune system was failing. He knew what was happening, but there was nothing he could do about it. "You fix things," he heard his sister say in his head. "That is what you do, Opa." "I am trying," he whispered back. "I am trying so hard." The cubs noticed that something was wrong. They pressed closer to him, sharing their warmth. Even the gray one, the angry one, stopped growling and lay against his side. On the 7th day, Tiho's fingers began to change color. First they turned white, then gray, then black, frostbite. He knew he would lose them. Maybe 2 fingers on his left hand, maybe more. It did not matter. Fingers could be replaced with machines. The cubs could not be replaced. He kept hunting. He kept feeding them. He kept holding them through the nights. The white female was the first to accept him fully. On the 9th night, she climbed onto his chest and curled up there, her small head tucked under his chin. She was warm and soft, and she smelled like snow and something else, something wild and strange. Tiho put his hand on her back and felt her heart beating. He cried then. He did not know why. The tears froze on his cheeks before they could fall, but something inside him broke open, and for a moment he was not an engineer or a survivor or a stranger in a strange land. He was just a man holding a child and praying for both of them to live. The light-furred male got better slowly. His fever broke on the 10th day. He started eating more. He started moving around the shelter, sniffing at things, exploring. Once, he even licked Tiho's hand. It felt like forgiveness. The gray one was the last. He watched everything with those angry yellow eyes. He did not trust. He did not forgive. But on the 14th night, something changed. Tiho collapsed. His body simply gave out. The fever and the cold and the hunger took everything from him. He fell onto his side and could not get up. His vision went dark around the edges. He thought, "This is how I die." Then he felt something warm against his back, something heavy and soft. He forced his eyes open and saw the gray cub lying behind him. The cub had pulled a thermal blanket over both of them with his teeth. He was not growling anymore. He was just there, keeping Tiho warm. "Thank you," Tiho whispered. The cub made a sound. Not a growl, not a whimper, something deeper, something that might have been understanding. Tiho closed his eyes. He was so tired, so very tired, but he could not give up, not now, not when they were so close. He thought about his sister. He thought about Earth. He thought about all the things he would do if he survived this. He would call Yuna. He would tell her she was right about him being stubborn. He would laugh and she would laugh and everything would be okay. But first he had to survive. First he had to keep these cubs alive. First he had to make it through one more night. The storm continued to rage. The cold continued to bite. But in the small shelter, 4 bodies lay pressed together, sharing warmth, sharing breath, sharing something that had no name but felt like family. Tiho held on. He did not know how. He did not know why. He only knew that he would not let go. Not until help came. Not until these children were safe. Even if it killed him. Far above the frozen moon, a warship waited in the darkness of space. The ship was called the Fang of Ancestors. It was a Kyrthian battle cruiser, built for war and painted with the colors of 100 victories. Its hull was black as night. Its weapons could burn cities to ash. Its crew was made of warriors who feared nothing. But now that crew was afraid. Voreth stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the swirling clouds that covered Velreth 7. He was the alpha of his pack, the leader, the strongest. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his fur dark as shadow, his eyes like molten gold. Scars covered his body, each one a story of battle and survival. No enemy had ever made him run. No challenge had ever made him bend. But this was not an enemy he could fight. This was a storm, and somewhere beneath those clouds his children were dying. "Any signal?" he asked. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Nothing, Alpha," replied the communications officer. "The ion interference is too strong. We cannot reach the surface." Voreth's claws dug into the metal railing in front of him. The metal bent under his grip. 15 days. The storm had lasted 15 days. No ship could fly through it. No message could pass through it. The moon was completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy, and on that moon, in a den built into the side of a thermal mountain, were his cubs. 3 cubs, 2 males and 1 female, the youngest members of his pack, his blood, his future, his heart. Doran approached from behind. He was the pack second, Voreth's most trusted warrior and oldest friend. His fur was gray with age and one of his eyes was missing, lost in a battle long ago. But his remaining eye was sharp, and it was full of sorrow. "Brother," Doran said quietly, "we must prepare ourselves." "Prepare for what?" Voreth did not turn around. "The cubs, the guardians. The storm lasted too long. You know what that means." "I know nothing." Voreth's voice was like ice. "Until I see their bodies with my own eyes, I know nothing." Doran was silent for a moment. Then he said, "The pack needs leadership. They need to see you strong. They need to see you accept what has happened." Voreth spun around. His golden eyes burned with rage. "What has happened? Tell me, old friend, what has happened? Have you seen my children die? Have you held their cold bodies in your arms? No. You have seen only clouds and storms and your own fear. Do not speak to me of acceptance." Doran lowered his head. "Forgive me, Alpha." Voreth turned back to the window. His rage faded as quickly as it had come, leaving only emptiness behind. He remembered the last time he had seen his cubs. They had been playing in the den, chasing each other around the fire pit, yipping and growling like the wild things they were. The smallest one, the white female, had climbed onto his lap and fallen asleep there. He had held her for hours, feeling her small heart beat against his chest. "I will come back soon," he had told them. "Be good for the Guardians." He did not know that would be the last time. An old voice spoke from the shadows. "Alpha." Voreth looked toward the speaker. It was Elder Kalith, the spiritual leader of the pack. She was ancient, her fur white with age, her body bent and frail. But her eyes were clear and bright, full of wisdom and something else. Something that might have been hope. "What do you want, Elder?" Voreth asked. Kalith walked slowly toward him, her claws clicking on the metal floor. "I have been dreaming," she said. "The ancestors have shown me things." Voreth did not believe in dreams. He believed in claws and teeth and the strength of his own body, but he respected the elder. She had served his pack for longer than he had been alive. "What have they shown you?" he asked. Kalith looked out the window at the storm-covered moon. "There is an old prophecy," she said, "older than our ship, older than our wars. It speaks of a time when the frost would claim the blood of the Alpha, when all hope would seem lost." "I know this prophecy," Voreth said bitterly. "It ends with death and mourning." "No," Kalith shook her head slowly. "That is not how it ends. Listen carefully, Alpha. The prophecy says, when the frost claims the blood of the Alpha, a stranger's fire will guard the flame." Voreth frowned. "What does that mean?" "I do not know," Kalith admitted. "But I have seen something in my dreams, a figure in the darkness, small and weak and furless, but it burns with a fire that the cold cannot touch. It holds your children close and refuses to let them go." "A stranger," Voreth repeated. "What stranger? There are no strangers on Velrath 7, only our people and—" He stopped. His eyes widened. "And the humans," Kalith finished. "Yes, the soft ones, the prey animals, the ones we do not respect." Voreth shook his head. "That is impossible. A human could not survive in that storm. A human could not protect Kyrthian cubs. They are too weak, too fragile. They would freeze in hours." "Perhaps," Kalith said, "or perhaps we do not know humans as well as we think we do." The words hung in the air between them. Voreth thought about the humans he had known. They were small and soft and strange. They had no claws, no fangs, no fur. They could not run fast or fight well. They broke easily. They died easily. They were nothing. But they were also stubborn. He had noticed that about them. When a human started something, they did not stop. When they fixed a machine, they worked until it was perfect. When they made a promise, they kept it, even when keeping it was hard. Could a human really survive that storm? Could a human really save his children? It seemed impossible. But then again, many things seemed impossible until they happened. On the 16th day, the storm began to weaken. The clouds started to thin. The lightning came less often. The sensors on the Fang of Ancestors detected something they had not detected in over 2 weeks. A heat signature, small and weak, coming from the ruins of the den. Voreth's heart stopped. "Is it them?" he demanded. "Is it my cubs?" The sensor officer studied her screens. Her hands were shaking. I am not sure, Alpha. The signal is strange. There is more than one heat source. At least 4, maybe more." 4, there had been 3 cubs and 2 guardians. If one guardian had survived. But that did not explain the 4th signal, the 4th heat source. What was it? Who was it? "Prepare my shuttle," Voreth commanded. His voice was strong again. His eyes were bright. "We are going down there now. Alpha, the storm is not completely gone. It may still be dangerous too." I said now. No one argued with him. 20 minutes later, a shuttle broke through the clouds and descended toward the frozen surface of Velrath 7. Inside, Voreth sat alone, his claws digging into the armrests of his seat. His whole body was tense. His whole mind was focused on one thing. Please, he thought, please let them be alive. Please let this prophecy be true. The shuttle landed in a field of ice and broken rock. The den was just ahead, half collapsed, covered in snow. It looked like a grave. Voreth stepped out into the cold. The wind bit at his fur, but he did not feel it. He walked toward the den, his feet crunching in the snow, his heart pounding in his chest. He smelled death. The bodies of the guardians frozen and still. He smelled blood, old blood dried and dark. He smelled something else too, something he did not expect. Human. He followed the scent. It led him to a small shelter built from wreckage and debris. It was ugly and rough, but it was solid. And inside. Voreth pushed aside the covering and looked down. His eyes went wide. His breath caught in his throat. There, in a nest of thermal blankets and broken machines, lay a human male. He was barely alive. His skin was gray with cold. His fingers were black with frostbite. His eyes were closed and sunken. And pressed against him, warm and safe and breathing, were 3 Kyrthian cubs. His cubs. Alive. Voreth could not move. He stood at the entrance of the small shelter, looking down at the impossible thing before him. His mind could not understand what his eyes were seeing. It did not make sense. None of it made sense. A human, a small, fragile, furless human, lying in a nest of broken machines and torn blankets, half dead from cold and hunger and exhaustion. And wrapped around him, pressed against his body like he was their mother, were 3 Kyrthian cubs. His cubs, his children, alive. The white female was curled on the human's chest, her small head tucked under his chin. The light-furred male lay against his side, one paw resting on the human's arm. The gray one, the largest and strongest of the 3, was pressed against the human's back, his body forming a protective wall against the cold. They were not just surviving, they were protecting him. Voreth made a sound. He did not mean to. It came from somewhere deep in his chest, a noise of shock and confusion and something else he could not name. The sound woke the gray cub, who lifted his head and looked at his father with tired yellow eyes. For a moment neither of them moved. Then the cub made a soft sound, a greeting, a welcome, a request. Do not hurt him. That was what the sound meant. Please, father, do not hurt him. Voreth stepped into the shelter. The space was too small for his massive body. He had to crouch down, his shoulders pressing against the walls. But he did not care. He needed to see. He needed to understand. He looked at the human more closely. The creature was a mess. His clothing was torn and dirty. His skin was covered in scratches and bite marks, some old and healing, some fresh and raw. His fingers were black with frostbite. At least 3 of them would need to be removed, maybe more. But it was his face that struck Voreth the most. Even unconscious, even dying, the human's face was not peaceful. It was determined, like he was fighting a battle in his dreams, like he refused to surrender even in sleep. The gray cub moved. He left his position behind the human and walked toward his father. Then he did something that Voreth had never seen him do before. He pressed his head against Voreth's leg and made a sound of pure relief. You are here. You are finally here. I tried so hard to keep him safe until you came. Voreth understood then. His son had not just been accepting the human's care. He had been returning it. He had been protecting the creature who had protected him. The other cubs began to wake. The light-furred male opened his eyes and saw his father. He made a happy sound and tried to stand, but he was still weak. The white female lifted her head from the human's chest. She looked at Voreth with eyes full of trust and love, but she did not move. She stayed where she was, like she was afraid to leave her spot. It is okay, Voreth said softly. I am here now, you are safe. The female made a questioning sound. What about him? What about the human? Before Voreth could answer, the human moved. It was a small movement, Just a twitch of his hand, a slight turn of his head, but it was enough. His eyes opened. They were brown and soft and full of pain, but they were awake. They were alive. The human looked up at Vorath. He saw a 7-foot Kyrthian warrior looming over him, covered in scars, with teeth that could tear through metal. He saw golden eyes that burned like fire. He saw claws that could rip him apart in seconds. He did not flinch. He did not cry out in fear. He did not beg for mercy. Instead, he spoke. His voice was weak and rough and barely more than a whisper, but his words were clear. They need more protein. I ran out yesterday. I have been keeping them warm, but they need real food. Can you get them food? Vorath stared at him. The human was dying. His body was shutting down. He had given everything he had to keep these cubs alive. And his first thought, his first words were not about himself. They were about the children. Something broke inside Vorath, something he had carried for a long time, a belief, a certainty, a truth that his people had held for generations. Humans are weak, humans are prey, humans are nothing. It was a lie, all of it was a lie. Vorath knelt down. The movement brought him face to face with the human. He could see the fear in those brown eyes now. The human knew what Vorath was. He knew how easily he could be killed. But still he did not look away. Still he held his ground. "What is your name?" Vorath asked. The human blinked. He had not expected that question. "Tiho," he said. "Kang Tiho." Tiho? Vorath tasted the name on his tongue. It was strange, human, but it fit this strange human creature who had done the impossible. "You saved my children," Vorath said. "You walked into a storm that should have killed you. You stayed in a place where no human should survive. You hunted for food. You built shelter. You gave them your warmth when you had none to spare." Tiho said nothing. He just looked at Vorath with those tired, determined eyes. "Why?" Vorath asked. "They are not your kind, they are not your pack, they are nothing to you. Why did you do this?" Tiho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "They are children," he said. "They were scared and cold and alone. What else was I supposed to do?" That was all, no grand speech, no proud declaration, just a simple truth spoken by a simple man. What else was I supposed to do? Vorath felt something wet on his face. He touched his cheek and found that he was crying. He had not cried in 20 years, not since his mate had died giving birth to these very cubs. But now the tears came, and he could not stop them. He leaned forward slowly, carefully. He pressed his forehead against the human's forehead. It was a gesture that no Kyrthian gave lightly. It meant respect. It meant honor. It meant family. "You are no stranger," Vorath said. His voice shook with emotion. "You are blood, my blood, their blood, from this day until the stars grow cold." Tiho's eyes widened. He did not understand the full meaning of what Vorath was saying, but he understood enough. He understood that he was no longer alone. The cubs began to move then. They gathered around Tiho and their father, pressing their small bodies against both of them. The white female licked Tiho's cheek. The light-furred male rested his head on Tiho's leg. The gray one, the proud one, the one who had protected Tiho through the long nights, pressed his forehead against Tiho's hand. They were a pack now, all of them together. Vorath lifted his head and looked at the human. Tiho was crying too, though he probably did not realize it. The tears froze on his cheeks before they could fall. "Come," Vorath said. "Let us get you somewhere warm. You need medical attention, food, rest." "The cubs," Tiho said weakly. "Make sure they—" "The cubs are fine," Vorath interrupted gently. "You have done your job, little human. You have done more than anyone could have asked, more than anyone believed possible. Now let me take care of you." Vorath reached down and lifted Tiho in his arms. The human weighed almost nothing. He was so small, so fragile, so impossibly weak. And yet he had done what warriors could not. He had done what Vorath himself could not. He had kept 3 children alive through 17 days of frozen hell. As Voreth carried Tiho out of the shelter, the cubs followed close behind. They would not leave his side. They would never leave his side again. He was their pack now, their family, their second father. The storm was finally over. The sky was clear and cold and full of stars. Voreth looked up at those stars and made a silent promise. The galaxy would know what this human had done. The galaxy would learn to respect his kind. The galaxy would never again call humans weak or worthless or prey. Because if one small, soft, furless creature could do what Kang Tiho had done, then humans were not weak at all. They were simply quiet about their strength. And that, Voreth thought, made them more dangerous than any species in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the storm. Tiho stood in front of a mirror looking at himself. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. He was thinner now, his face more angular, his eyes carrying something they had not carried before, something that looked like wisdom or maybe just exhaustion that had become permanent. His left hand was different too. 3 fingers were gone, replaced by metal ones that moved when he thought about moving them. They were not perfect. Sometimes they clicked when he bent them. Sometimes they felt cold even in warm rooms. But they worked, and that was enough. A knock came at his door. "Enter," he said. The door opened and 3 shapes rushed inside. They were not small anymore. 6 months of proper food and care had changed them into healthy young Kyrthians, almost half the size of an adult. But they still moved like cubs. They still played like cubs. And when they saw Tiho, they still acted like cubs. The white female reached him first. She pressed her head against his chest and made a happy sound. The light-furred male came next, nudging Tiho's hand with his nose until Tiho scratched behind his ears. The gray one, the proud one, walked more slowly. But when he reached Tiho, he pressed his forehead against Tiho's leg in the gesture of respect he had learned from his father. "Good morning," Tiho said, smiling. "Are you ready for today?" The cubs made sounds of excitement. They had been waiting for this day for weeks. The whole galaxy had been waiting. Today was the ceremony. Tiho had tried to refuse it at first. He did not want attention. He did not want fame. He was just an engineer who had done what needed to be done. But Voreth had insisted. The pack had insisted. The coalition had insisted. And in the end, Tiho had given in. An hour later, he stood in the great hall of the Kyrthian homeworld. The hall was enormous. Its ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Its walls were covered with ancient paintings showing the history of the Kyrthian people. Thousands of years of battles and victories and heroes. And today, a human would be added to that history. The room was full of people, not just Kyrthians but representatives from every species in the coalition. There were the tall, thin Velanthi with their silver skin. There were the heavy, powerful Gretharian with their 4 arms. There were the small, quick Fenish who moved like shadows. And in the front row, watching with quiet pride, was a human woman in a formal suit. Ambassador Park Jihai represented humanity in the coalition. She was small and neat, with black hair and sharp eyes. She had fought for years to make other species respect her people. Today, she finally had proof that humans deserved that respect. Voreth stood at the center of the hall, waiting. He was dressed in ceremonial armor, his dark fur brushed until it shone. When he saw Tiho enter, he smiled. It was strange to see a Kyrthian smile. Their faces were not made for it, but Voreth managed it anyway. "Come forward," he said. Tiho walked toward him. The cubs walked beside him, refusing to leave his side. The crowd watched in silence. Many of them did not understand what they were seeing. A human being honored by Kyrthians. It was unheard of. It was impossible. And yet here it was, happening before their eyes. Tiho stopped in front of Voreth. The Alpha towered over him, more than 2 feet taller, his golden eyes looking down at the small human who had saved his children. Kang Tiho, Vorath said, his voice carrying through the hall. 6 months ago you walked into a storm that should have killed you. You found my cubs alone and dying in the ruins of their den. You could have left them. You could have saved yourself. No one would have blamed you. He paused. The hall was completely silent. But you did not leave, Vorath continued. You stayed, you fought. You gave your warmth when you had none to spare. You gave your food when you were starving. You gave your fingers to the frostbite so that you could keep my children alive. For 17 days you held them in your arms and refused to let them go. Tiho felt his cheeks grow warm. He was not comfortable with praise. He never had been. I asked you why, Vorath said. Do you remember your answer? Tiho nodded slowly. I said they were children. They were scared and cold and alone. What else was I supposed to do? A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the aliens did not understand. What did it matter that they were children? They were not his children. They were not his species. Why would he risk his life for them? But some of them understood. Some of them looked at the small human with new eyes, eyes that held something like wonder. Vorath raised his hand for silence. For generations, my people believed that humans were weak. We called them prey animals. We said they survived only through numbers and tools. We did not respect them. He looked at Tiho with deep emotion in his golden eyes. We were wrong. The words echoed through the hall. Wrong. The Kyrthians, the mighty warrior species, had been wrong about humans. It was an admission that no one had expected. Humans are not weak, Vorath said. They are merely quiet about their strength. They do not show their power through claws or fangs or size. They show it through something else, something harder to see, something I did not understand until I found this man half dead in the ruins of my den, still holding my children, still refusing to let them go. He paused. They call it stubbornness. They call it endurance. They call it love. I call it the fire that does not die, the flame that burns even in the darkest cold, and I am honored to have such a fire in my pack. Vorath reached down and took Tiho's hand. The metal fingers clicked softly against his claws. Kang Tiho, from this day forward, you are no longer a stranger. You are Kyrthian. You are pack. You are family. I give you a new name, a name that will be remembered long after we are both dust. I name you Kael'thar, he who guards the flame. Kael'thar? Tiho felt the word settle into his heart. It fit there perfectly, like it had always been waiting for him. The cubs could not contain themselves any longer. They rushed forward and tackled Tiho, knocking him off his feet. He fell onto his back, laughing as they piled on top of him. The white female licked his face. The light-furred male made happy sounds. The gray one, the proud one, simply lay across his chest and refused to move. The crowd watched. Some of them laughed. Some of them smiled. Some of them felt something change inside their hearts. Ambassador HFY stood up and walked toward the group on the floor. She looked down at Tiho, buried under 3 happy cubs, and she smiled a small, proud smile. You did good, she said quietly. You did really good. Tiho looked up at her. His eyes were wet, but he was still smiling. I just did what needed to be done, he said. I know, HFY nodded. That is what makes us human. Later that night, after the ceremony was over and the crowds had gone home, Tiho sat on a balcony overlooking the Kyrthian capital. The cubs were asleep inside, curled together in a pile of fur and warmth. Vorath sat beside Tiho, both of them watching the stars. The galaxy is talking about you, Vorath said. About what you did, about what it means. What does it mean? Tiho asked. Vorath was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, it means they were wrong about your kind, all of them. They thought humans were weak because you are small and soft and easily broken. But you are not weak. You are strong in ways that we cannot measure, strong in ways that matter more than claws or teeth or size. He looked at Tiho with something like affection in his golden eyes. My people have a new saying now. Do you want to hear it? Tiho nodded. Do not judge a human by their claws. Judge them by what they will endure for those they love. Tiho felt tears sting his eyes. He blinked them away. That is a good saying, he said. It is the truth. Voreth reached over and put his massive hand on Tiho's shoulder, and the galaxy is finally beginning to understand it. They sat together in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, on 100 different worlds, other species were hearing the story of what had happened on Velrath 7. They were learning about the human who had walked into a frozen hell to save children that were not his own. They were beginning to wonder what else they had gotten wrong about humanity. The story would spread. The truth would grow. And slowly, one heart at a time, the galaxy would learn to respect the quiet strength of a species that did not give up, did not surrender, did not let go of those they loved, even if it killed them. Inside the room, the white cub stirred in her sleep. She made a soft sound and reached out with one paw, searching for something. Tiho stood up and walked inside. He lay down beside the cubs and let them press against him, sharing their warmth just as he had shared his. He closed his eyes. He was home now. He had a family. He had a name. And somewhere in the frozen darkness of a distant moon, his story was just beginning.